Hey everyone, welcome to the third and final Asexual Awareness Week panel. I thought I was like super clever by titling them all like sequel, series ender, like series starter. But no one commented on it but like me in my head. So I'm gonna just assume that everyone was like so intimidated by how funny they thought it was that they didn't, that they didn't like say anything to me. But I've been so happy that Rosiee came to me and asked if I was willing to host these and like on the channel and also moderate. And also, I have my voice back. It's been a week, but I have it back now. So I'm very excited to be joined by these amazing YA contemporary authors. Before we talk to them, I just want to say like a quick sentence about me if you don't know who I am. But I am Lily, and I am the book reviewer slash face behind like the official Utopia State of Mind. No blue check mark, but like I have seen unofficial like shenanigans happening. So this is the real me. And now I'm gonna have the authors introduce themselves, and then we're going to chat about all these questions that I have about like sexuality and books and kind of everything in between. So, Akemi, do you want to start?
Yeah. Hi, I'm Akemi Dawn Bowman. I'm the author of books that includes Starfish, Summerbird Blue, the Infinity Courts series, and most recently my middle grade Where the Lost Ones Go. And I'm living in Scotland, so that's why it's really dark right now.
Okay, Amanda.
Hi, Amanda DeWitt. I wrote Aces Wild, a heist. It's my debut novel. I have another one coming out next fall called Red Martin Ruins It All that I'm fighting with right now to get into shape. Yeah, I'm in Florida and that's why it's sunny here.
And
Sorry. So I was muted, but like actually speaking. But yeah, Anne.
and I'm Anna Mariano. I'm the author of several different things. My middle grade, Love Sugar Magic. I've got a couple YA books, including, most recently, It Sounds Like This, my Ace Marching Band book, which is not the only Ace Marching Band book out this year, which is exciting.
Yeah, your book came up in one of the earlier ACE panels when we were talking to Sky, and it was like marching band, marching band. It's interesting, or I think it's fun that like in the same sort of time, no, similar time period, right? We have like both of these marching band stories.
It was super fun for us because we were like, I thought I was being like very niche and strange and specific, and like so exciting to find someone else doing the exact same thing. And I actually knew someone who was like working on an Ace Marching Band manuscript several years ago. So I was like, this is just becoming a thing, I guess.
I'm here for it. So I was looking at the first question that I had. It is very, very long. So I'm going to break it up actually, because even I don't like remember where I started by the end of this paragraph. But anyway, basically, I want to jump right in and I want to know about, I think often, especially for YA books as well, like that's kind of where a lot of questioning is happening and like questioning representation of sort of just in general, but also about sexuality. So I wanted to know, how did you approach both um, this process as well as the misconceptions or mistakes one makes along the way, and if your character like knew at the beginning about their sexuality or more clearly about kind of themselves as a whole, what kind of off the page character building did you think about that maybe isn't, I mean, maybe was in the book or maybe not in the book? So Amanda, do you want to start?
Sure. Yeah. So I'm gonna hold this lock that's right next to me. So in my book, I have 5 asexual characters, and kind of when I started, I didn't want it to be about like Jack, his main character, discovering his asexuality. I was like, I want them to be asexual. That's it. It really doesn't have like that much to do with the plot. I just want them to be like that. Um, I did kind of so there is a character who is younger, and there's a little bit of a conflict where one of the other characters is like, do you even know that you're ace, like are you old enough? And another one kind of pushes back like, even if she does find out that she's not, like who are we to tell her that she can't identify as this right now, or she can't feel that way right now? And so I kind of wanted to get a little bit of that kind of inner community conflict that you unfortunately see sometimes, without like a little bit of that without getting like really in the nitty gritty of discovering it, or I don't know, going through it too much. Just kind of is what they are.
Anna?
Yeah, I pretty much only write questioning characters. Very opposite of like that wanting to have it all figured out, because I don't always feel like I have it all figured out. So like first YA book, gender questioning character, just kind of like not a plot point, just kind of several scenes where she's like, uh, and then it sounds like this. I did obviously get some feedback of like, I would have liked this to be elevated, or I would have liked, some people do know their things. So when I started this book, I was like, for sure, knowing that I was going to have the secondary character be like gray ace, gray arrow, and very sure about it, and had done all the research and had done all the spending time online figuring it all out. And he was the one who brought it up and made it something that my main character could be like, oh, yeah, that makes sense. Fascinating. And that's kind of where she ends it. Like she ends on, that's interesting. Maybe I should look into it. So yeah, questioning characters. But we also have Bloom. He's somewhere up here. He's here. I call him the love interest, but it's not quite the correct descriptor, because it's not a romance. So important secondary character, love interest sort of, who is more sure about his life, his identity, everything that's going on. He has also like hyper focused on it, so we love that for him. And Yasmin is just kind of living her little high school life. She's got a lot going on. She's got friendship breakups. She's got bullying, so she didn't really take that space on the page to decide on a label exactly. And then I also, just side note, have a story in this anthology that I just fully did not label my demi character. I incorrectly assumed that coding would hit to all readers the same way it would hit me. Like I had her say, I guess I'm just this person sexual. And then people were like, I feel weird that there wasn't a kiss at the end of this. And I was like, oh no, that's not gonna happen. She's a spectrum. Like, but I didn't realize that I like maybe needed to be more explicit about it. So I think I'm, figuring out what is the right amount, or how to tell a story the way that makes sense for me, and then also remembering that there are readers and that they have expectations too.
Yeah, I love that your book and the Summer Bitter and Sweet, so like an earlier panel contemporary, both have this like ace character mentor almost, who's like, look, you need to sit with yourself for a second. We have some things to talk about. And I love that. I want it to be a trope. Like I want that kind of to be a trope that we now see in things.
I mean, I think it's very realistic to like people's lives, in terms of just thinking that you're weird and then slowly getting this idea of like, oh, there's actual labels, there's actual names. And I feel like that's the thing that people always say is, oh, why do you need a label for that? Why do you need so showing that kind of like how it feels when you find a community is nice too.
Mm-hmm. It also brought up to me when you were talking a little about code and language, it brought up to me in an earlier panel as well, we got a question which was like, who is in your headcanon ace, but like is never confirmed on, the page, in a TV show, in a film or whatever. And it reminds me of like that, and the idea of certain like cues or whatever being sort of obvious or like clear to some people, and then also for other people it is not as obvious. But Akemi, do you want to also chime in?
Yeah, so Rumi in Summerbird Blue is definitely questioning throughout the book. I think the way I kind of approached that one specifically was she knows the labels, she knows what they are, but she doesn't really feel strongly about using them yet, because I think she's still trying to figure it out. And I feel like that's kind of real for a lot of people who are trying to figure out what it is, or maybe don't feel comfortable like committing to one thing because they don't know if they're going to change their mind or if they have it all figured out. So I kind of approach that for Rumi as it's okay to question, and it's okay to try out labels if you want to, don't use them if you don't want to. And I wanted that to come across as like a very personal choice and a personal thing, so that people kind of who are reading it maybe could feel more like, oh yeah, it's okay not to know, or it's okay to kind of be sure but still not want to use a label, or to be very sure and still not want to use a label. There's all these different kind of areas of it's all okay, I guess is what I'm trying to say. So that's how I approached it for Rumi specifically. For some of the other books, like Harley in the Sky, is probably not known for having an ace spectrum character, but I actually wrote her fully demi the whole time, and there's kind of a conversation, without giving away spoilers, where to me it seemed very obvious, that, and I think it feels kind of cool when readers pick up on that, because I get messages sometimes being like, is Harley demi, because I feel like she is, and I'm like, yes, I'm glad that, you know what I mean. And so and she doesn't use labels the whole time, and I think that sometimes that's nice too, for people who, again, maybe haven't settled on an exact label but still feel the way they feel. It's nice to have that representation as well. So yeah, I think I'm just of the mind of like, all representation, and you know what I mean, it's somebody's gonna find something that they relate to, and I think that's always a good thing. So
Yeah, I love what you said there. And I think as well that like what comfortability factor I feel like people have with labels also changes too. I think that sometimes we can get into this. What was it? I think that what I love about Felix Ever After, or one of the things I love specifically, is like how specifically it discusses the fact that labels can change. And I feel like there's this almost like, sometimes there's this feeling like, oh, I found a label and now I need to like box myself in because I feel like this is resonates with me, but then not realizing that other labels could, also apply to you, or like there's there's a variety of spectrums. And I think that that's one of the things. I know I keep mentioning other panels in this like week of Asexual Awareness Week that we've done, but like one of the things that Rosie and I were chatting about was how varied all these books are, with the types of representation and the types of like conversations that are happening, whether it's in the sci-fi fantasy space or the contemporary space. And it just like makes our hearts so happy. um the next question I have are kind of like what you were talking about, Kemi. So I'm gonna ask you now. Ask everyone, but I'm gonna start with you about what have been some of the reactions from readers to your queer characters. And so did you have any reservations about writing queer main characters? Because that was a question we as well got like in an earlier Q&A session for our panel. So Akemi, do you want to just keep going with what you were saying?
yeah, so I kind of mentioned, I mean, readers picking up on Harley's asexuality has been really cool. I think it's more of a like they want to just check in to make sure kind of thing. For Rumi, I think that was, I think in general, the reaction that she kind of gets the most is people relating to how she's questioned, and that kind of uncertainty of whether she wants to commit to a label or not, like not sure if she's going to change her mind, feeling like, she doesn't totally know what exactly fits, but still feeling have the feelings that she's feeling. And so, yeah, I think it's readers just saying like, that's how I feel, and like feeling that that's okay to not know. And I think that's kind of like the big takeaway from that. What was the other half of the question? Sorry.
Oh, it was, hold on, I want to make sure. Yeah, did you have any reservations about writing your queer main characters?
Yeah, so for me, no reservations at all. Obviously, like anytime I write anything, like I hope to be sensitive about stuff and to word things carefully and thoughtfully and stuff, so that's always a thing, but I don't think it's a reservation. It's not something that would have made me not want to write a character. I think if anything, maybe it was just opening up your heart a little bit to the page and just being like, am I sharing too much of myself that somebody might dislike? And I think that fear of being like, if I share this exact thought, which is something that I felt like, and if everybody like hates it, or like, is that gonna, I guess, hurt my feelings a little? But yeah, I think that's just probably a typical writer thing. And I know we're supposed to have thick skin, but I don't always, probably never.
Yeah, I was doing a panel with Lane Clark, who wrote Love Times Infinity, and Lane was saying like the number one advice as a post debut or whatever was like to not write something so intimately personal because of that very thing, right? Like some people, are not gonna like it. Some people are gonna have qualms about it, and it just feels like, oh, like like a stab to the heart. Amanda, do you want to go next?
Sure. Yeah. Yeah, it's been great hearing from readers, especially like, that I guess these questions kind of tie together where when I started, I was like, I want to write multiple ace characters and I want it to be like very blatant. And of course I wasn't agent at the time. I didn't have an agent at the time, so I was kind of like, is there a place for this in publishing? Like I didn't have reservations about writing it, but I did have reservations like, is anyone going to buy this? Am I wasting my time? Which I'm really glad I wasn't. But because yeah, it's been great hearing from people who are excited, like, this, centers ace characters, but it's not necessarily about being asexual. There is like, I wanted to show like kind of the spectrum of asexuality. So it's been great, yeah, hearing from readers who are just excited to kind of have more in the widening canon of asexual representation.
Yeah, more ace heists. All the stealing of things.
Yeah.
Like stealing. Anna.
Yeah, I've had all sorts of reader reactions. Like, a major publication that I guess I won't name said, includes asexual representation, period. Lacking heart, period. So like garbage people. Like I've had like that kind of stuff, and like I told you, like people who were just like, why wasn't there a kiss at the end of this story? Boo. Like just not super amazing, loving reactions. I had people for this book say, I read the main character's ace, and I worked so hard. I like interviewed people about like, what is a one night stand? Explain it to me like I'm 5. Well, not like I'm 5, but I worked so hard. And then everyone was like, no. And I was like, okay, well, I did my best. So people read that character as ace spectrum, and I was like, I mean, probably, I don't know. I didn't do it on purpose. And then with this character, I've just gotten a lot of people like, there's something missing in this book. And that's a frustrating thing to hear. And it's, in YA, I think there's so much marketing of the romance and everyone is looking for that. And it's felt a little bit frustrating. And not to be negative, like I've had lots of really great people reach out and just say like, wow, this book made me feel really validated. That person didn't reach out. That person was, somebody sent it to me because it was really nice. And so I just stalked them quietly and didn't respond. But so there have been lots of really, really good reaction. There have been also some not great reactions. And I don't think, like y'all were saying, I don't think I was ever like not going to write it. I didn't have reservations of like, I will not do this necessarily. I mean, except for, running things by people, making sure that you have people checking and following behind and making sure you're respectful and everything. But I am an educator in Texas. So that's an interesting line to walk as a writer. And I want to always be representing the world and the teenagers that I see here in Houston, which is a very diverse world and a very diverse group of teenagers. But I'm also like, want to keep my job. So I've been really lucky with that. Everything has been going great. And I'm just kind of like, that's something that I always have in my head.
Yeah, I feel like what you kind of talked about, like the tropification, that's the word. I don't know if like that's the word, that everyone else uses, but that's what I thought it was. But yeah, like the tropification and the almost, what is the other word I want to say? Like the almost like assumption that there will always be a romance, I think is certainly something we're seeing like across genres as well, right? So I feel like that is entirely like an essay of large length for another day. But like that yeah, I think about that a lot. And that's why I want the ace mentor to be like my next trope of choice. I wanted to know what some of your other favorite asexual main characters or stories are. And then like my sub question to that was do you remember the first book that you read with an ace character? So do you want to start, Amanda?
Okay, let's see. One of my favorites, we were going to be debut buddies, but my date got pushed back, is Funeral Girl by Emma K. Oland. I think she was in another panel. But yeah, her ace main character and kind of how it plays into the story, but like it's just kind of who she is. I don't remember. Let's see. I also liked, he's not a main character. I liked the ace character in Raybearer. Especially from a fantasy. I was super excited. I don't remember his name because it's been a long time, but I was super excited when like he was so explicitly ace and like talked about it. Yeah, I definitely don't remember the first ace character I read. I know the first one I read as ace was Katniss from the Hunger Games. She was like my ace awakening. I was like, yeah, that's a really cool headcanon. And I was like, wait, why do I think that's so cool? So I always think of her that way.
Have you enthusiastically bonded with Rosiee over that headcanon?
No, I didn't know that they thought that too.
Oh my goodness. On another panel, actually the one with Emma, Rosiee was saying that they wrote a whole thread. And I think if you rewatch the other one, there's a specific hashtag that they mention in it, so you could search for it.
Okay.
But like a whole thread of just reading the first book and pulling out every single quote that like reads that way as well. Like that is a hill that Rosie's ready to die on.
Oh man, I'll have to find that. See, yeah, it was like I think it was a Tumblr post about like Arrow Ace Katniss, and I just blew my mind.
Mm-hmm. You should find if I can find it, I'll send it to you, or like I'll try to find the hashtag at least because that is
Okay, cool.
something
Thank you.
that Rosieee brings up on a frequent basis. Anna?
This is just the most recent one, so freshest in my head, but Summer, Bitter and Sweet. I just think that book is perfect in all ways, at all times, forever. And thinking on what else I was going to say. And the first Ace book that I read was like Word of Godded later, but the Tamara Pierce books, Protector of the Small series. And I mean, there's a reason that I wrote a character switched into a section of all boys, and then they all become the best friends in the world and they love each other. I loved that series so much. And I think it was the first series I read, and I had like the other Tamara Pierce series. There's a character, she's going through this whole adventure with her teacher, and then at the end they kiss, and it creeped me out. Like I did not like that. I was not an age gap fan back then, not now. It wasn't cool. It's probably fine if you read it as an adult and know that it's coming. But I was like freaked out by that. So when I read the Protector of the Small series, and the character had like crushes and was in a relationship but didn't end up with anyone, I think that to me was like the bridge to Terabithia. Like, I didn't know you could do that in a book. Characters could do that. Bridge to Terabithia, characters can die. And I think like my first reaction was like just that same exact like shock. Like I had to read it 3 more times to make sure I hadn't missed something because I didn't know you were allowed to do that, which is wild if you think about it. Because you know I was in middle school. Like I should have probably read a book that didn't end with a romance, but like I hadn't. So I loved that series. Loved it. And then much later, was looking up some stuff on probably Tumblr, and the author had said like, yeah. Someone asked like, well, who does she really end up with? Because there were some possibilities, and the author was like, yeah, I keep checking in on her, and she keeps saying I don't have time for that, so I don't think it's going to happen. And I was like, ah. And again, I was like, I didn't know you were allowed to do that. And then much later, she was like, yes, Kel is Arrow Ace. And I was like, yeah, that makes sense now.
Have you also spoken to Rosiee about this? In another panel, it wasn't an ace panel, but in another panel, Rosiee and I were chatting about how we wanted to organize like a read along for we weren't thinking about Cal, but we were thinking of, I think, the circle of Magic.
That is also a really
Is that
great
the
one.
name of that series? Like they each have their own discipline or whatever. We were like, we should, because it's
one of my many tropes is falling in love with a character and really relating to them, and then they were secretly lesbians all along, which is fine, but like confusing for me. Because I never had my lesbian awakening. So I was just like, what is it about? And then there was a Tumblr post about like, were you ace? Did you think that you were a lesbian for a long time? Like, were you confused? Here's the overlapping experiences. Yeah.
I feel like whenever Rosie and I manage to like get our acts together and make this read along a thing, we should just partner with you specifically for the entire Cal series, because I haven't finished it. I think I only read the first one or two, maybe.
It has some, some decisions were made about like Japan, but like there are other parts of it that I love so much.
Yeah. Okay. Akemi.
So I think the first book that I read that actually had like labels on the page was Let's Talk About Love. I think like I'm trying to think like what I'm very behind on my reading, first of all, so I have to say like a lot of the recent stuff, which is to be fair, like when I think more of the books with Ace Rep are actually coming out like in the last like couple of years versus I think Summerbird Blue came out, I think that was that like 2018, and I think at the time there still wasn't a whole ton that was definitely at least published by like a slightly more getting I don't want to say buzz because Summerbird Blue didn't get tons of buzz, but do you know what I mean, like a little bit more you could find it a little bit more easily, I guess is what I'm trying to say. And so yeah, so I think that was probably the first one that I read that actually had it on the page. I would have said probably Hunger Games for favorite as well. Katniss to me was always like definitely Ace and Arrow. I also these characters were never labeled. I don't even know if people would consider them Ace, but I think the way that the stories were. So for me, like Anne of Green Gables, Pride and Prejudice, there's something to me that the way that it's the friendship that was like the reason that they eventually found love was very relatable. And I think that's why I probably always gravitated to stories like that, is like because when there's like an instant love or instant thing, like I never connected to that and it never really made sense. But like when people are either like dislike each other or they're rivals or whatever, or they're just friends and it grows, like that makes so much more sense to me. And I think a lot of that has to do with obviously being Ace. So yeah, I think for me, like characters like that, I tend to, I guess I'm projecting, but that's books like that. I'm like, yeah, that's it for me.
And I haven't read Anne of Green Gables, but that's a slow burn one too, right? Like it takes a while. My mom has watched them, and all I can remember is like, peeking my head in sometimes. It's like, this is still burning. Like it's still going on.
Watch the new Canadian version because they have more explicit queer characters and they go to like a 1910 queer gala. It's great.
In the chat also, someone said that the first Ace book, like a character that they read was Summerbird Blue. So I wanted to mention that. The next question I have, which is kind of segueing into this, like the one we were just talking about, is that for some readers, this could be the first kind of Ace character they see on the page, or like the first Ace person, I guess, that they might have any contact with. So how do you balance writing a story that speaks to both like people who are either I guess now it's three, right? So like people who know kind of more about who they are and like their own sexuality, people who are questioning, or like people who I don't want to say don't know anything at all, but like people who don't know a lot about themselves yet. So how do you balance writing for those audiences? And is this something you thought about while drafting? So Amanda, you want to start us off?
Sure. So especially like having these conversations, and like you guys' books being more about like questioning or like influx, and I don't know, mine was very like, here's the word, do whatever with it. I think, I don't know if I even like thought this all the way through at the time. But for me, there was, especially when I was like a teenager, like late teens, the hardest thing for me was like, I found the word asexual. I related to it. but kind of had a hard time, like, I don't know, like, it was embarrassing or like, "Oh, no one cares, no one wants to hear it, whatever, like, we're gonna make fun of it," stuff like that. So I think the way I approached it wasn't so much for, it was for people who kinda already had that word, but were, like, grappling with it or embarrassed or just, like, not comfortable. Because I know, like, I was not fully comfortable writing about the ACE experience, at the time, and I'm still kind of embarrassed reading parts of it just because 'cause I'm like, "Oh my god." So I think for me, it was kind of for people who already had the word and, like, normalizing it more, and it was kinda like, "Okay, but and if people don't have the word yet and they do see it, that's great too." So I guess I kinda, like, lean toward that end of the spectrum.
Kemi?
Yeah, I think for me, it's very like I think tricky of a thing to try to write a book that's going to please everybody because it's impossible. So I think I went through like a little mini phase after my debut came out where I wanted to make everybody happy and then got very dizzy thinking about it. And I think at some point it kind of just clicked like this is an impossible task. Like you just have to write a book that's going to speak to you and hope it speaks to people who are going through like a similar thing. So that's kind of the way I write stuff now, and just I don't know, just try to be confident about that part of it. So yeah, I think as well. So that's basically it. It's just writing the book that speaks to you rather than everybody because it's just not going to you're not going to make everybody happy. I guess is what I'm trying to say. So
Anna?
Yeah, I mean that is so hard, like impossible struggle. So I kind of, like I was saying, I kind of just like put all those different characters in. Maybe not, yeah. Because I was able to put just a character who was like, this has been my hyperfixation. I'm very online and like I know what I'm talking about. To the point that like in a conversation, he's just without having ever talked to anyone, he's like, oh well, I don't feel that way, but that's because and everyone's like, what? He's like, oh, I'm Ace and Aero. You didn't know that? Which I love for him. And then another character who's hearing that and going like, you're what? That's what? What? Explain more? Okay, I'll go look it up. No, that doesn't sound right because everyone feels that way. Okay, I don't understand it, I guess. Um, so yeah, I don't know that I did that like super intentionally thinking of those different audiences, but I do think that I see all those people. I see a lot of, again, I'm talking about like my tutor students, my friends, people online, myself, all of it. I see people at the point where they're like, this is my whole thing. I know so much about it. I see people who are like, I've never heard of this before. And then people who are starting to be like, oh, that's starting to be familiar to me. I don't have any thoughts about that right now. I will deal with that later. I think I literally said that in this one. Like, I will figure out my gender identity after my life stops falling apart, which is kind of also Yasmin's take on, yeah.
I feel like that's what I said my whole teenage years. I was like, "Yeah, no, I'll worry about that later."
Yeah, like we push that aside for a minute.
And then I was like, "Maybe there's a reason I'm not worried about it."
I also wanted to mention that if anyone has any questions, they can drop them in the chat and I will try to keep track of them as well. One thing that I also was thinking about is what is one thing that you wish for more of in conversations or representation specifically of asexuality in the book community? Anna. I feel bad calling on people, but Anna.
Oh, yeah, this was the one that I like didn't have an answer ready for. It's okay. The thing about conversations online is that they trend terrible. So I almost don't want to wish for any conversations, but I'm just struggling. I mean, I think Amanda kind of brought up like the sort of intra community. Who knows? discussions and like invalidations that sometimes happen. I definitely would like there to be less of that. I would like everyone to just kind of come in with a lot of nuance, because like that is kind of what you need to talk about a spectrum. Like it's not going to work if you try to draw hard lines. So I think that is generally my wish for all online discussions, is for people to have a bit more nuance and make room for multiple experiences, and to not just make room for, but to value multiple experiences. Because I think there's so much discussion about like finding the right way to be whatever you are, or the right way to represent. And like, it's actually amazing to have different ways. Like, it's amazing to have a book that is called Ace is Wild. Like, that is amazing. And then it's also amazing to have a book where the characters are questioning and do not like come in knowing that and yelling it. Like, those are both good things. It is a net good to have both of those. There's not one that's right and one that's wrong at all. And I feel like that generally, not always. I mean, I think the Ace, I feel like online ACE discussions have been pretty chill mostly that I have encountered. That's probably wrong now that I've said it, but the community seems pretty open and welcoming. But I think generally online, like, it's good to remember that there's not a right way to do things.
Yeah, I think that if you like, if more books are published from various lenses within the ACE community, like, it only allows for a richer, more varied understanding of what it means. Amanda.
Oh yeah, this is the hardest one. Yeah, a lot of what Anna said. I know I haven't really seen it so much in the book community, but one thing that kind of bothers me when we talk about like being ace and stuff is I hate how some people have a tendency to frame it as like, I don't know, throwing it's because it is a spectrum and people are so different. Sometimes they tend to kind of throw certain subsections under the bus, like, oh yeah, asexual people, like, they can still have sex. Like, some are sex favorable, and it's like, yeah, they are, but that doesn't mean they're more normal. Like, there tends to sometimes people position it as like, well, they can still be normal too, and I wish we could move away from that and not try to make it more palatable or understandable to people who aren't ace, and just kind of, yeah, embrace the whole spectrum and, like, all of them are all of them are valid.
Yeah, that reminds me of this thing that I read in the Angela Chen book, but I don't remember what it's called. I like vividly know what the cover is. I think I don't know what it's called. I'll leave, like, I'll look for it and then I'll put it in the chat. But basically how some people have this kind of like base assumption, which I think is natural. It's what I thought of as well at the beginning, about like, because of asexual and the way that it's like framed, of it being a lack of, and it's always like defined within lack. Do you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And I think what Angela Chen did a really great job of doing is like breaking down this idea, just even from the word alone, that it has, where like it's always centering almost like almost like the ghost, right, of like a different identity, kind of like what you were saying with like the normal, right? Like it always is like, has that thing just like looming there when language and conversations like that. So yeah, I will look up the thing.
That's a really good point, in that, like, yeah, I struggled a long time like writing it, because it was like, as an asexual person, I don't really want to talk about sex. Like, that's kind of the whole thing. But you almost have to like have the contrast. I don't know. It's a weird line to walk.
Yeah, the book is called Ace: What Asexuality Reveals About Desire, Society, and the Meaning of Sex. It's like the one it's okay, it's not the one nonfiction book I'll read, but like, I don't read a lot of nonfiction, but I recommend it. Akemi.
Yeah, I'm probably going to parrot a little bit of what's already been said, because I agree on so much of that. Is sometimes I feel like when you have like these I guess areas of representation, and people want to have like check boxes, and if you don't check all those boxes, they get very passionate, I guess is the way to describe it. And sometimes it feels like the last thing, like, I mean, I think I have a fear. This is probably something to discuss with my therapist, but I think I have a fear of disappointing people that's like overwhelming sometimes. And so the thought of like that I could write something that would upset somebody just because it wasn't their experience when it was mine or it was somebody else's, it's a very difficult thing. And I think especially because there's sometimes gray area. I mean, within asexuality, you have gray, demi, you have so many different things. You have people who are arrow as well as ace and people who are not. And I think that sometimes like your experience it's just not going to speak to everybody within that group. And so I think my hope is that people can find a way to just be like more loving and celebratory, I guess, that people do have different experiences. That would be a nice thing to think that could happen eventually. And also to have more stories of people just being who they are and not necessarily having to have, not that it's bad to have it, but to be able to have a story that's not necessarily about the pain and struggles of being, of how they feel and like, the discrimination and anything, just to have a story where you're just living your life, going on an adventure, you know what I mean? Building robots, like whatever it is that you're doing. And that's just another part of you, which is nice. I got to actually write a short story, which I don't think I can say too much about what it's about, but it's for an ACE anthology that's coming out, I believe next year, but I don't think there's a firm due date, but it's called Being Ace. And it's essentially like my sci-fi dream come true of just being able to write about a character who's ace, but that's not at all what the story's about. And that was really fun. And I have a feeling the whole anthology is going to be so cool because it's just a collection of stories like that. So.
And if you don't mind me hopping in just because I had some time and I remembered another thing that I should have mentioned first, probably. Just generally speaking, this is also like I want this in all of publishing, but I also really want to see more ace people of color, characters of color, I guess, and authors of color, because I feel like it's sometimes this happens everywhere all the time. Like pick a marginalization and people will forget to make it intersectional. But I feel like sometimes that conversation just kind of gets lost or is forgotten, and then you see people come up with kind of really weird ideas that like there is a like platonic ideal of an ace person, and that platonic ideal just happens to be white. That kind of thing. So also, since I'm backtracking on my answer here, I would also like to backtrack on my answer of characters that I've read recently and add Daniel Rotten, probably has a Brazilian last name, from Gabriela Martin's Bad at Love, because he was doing a lot of great stuff and being like, everyone is just looking at me and making a lot of assumptions, just a lot of assumptions about how I interact with people and sexuality, and those assumptions are not true. And so I thought that was a really nice, like, even if I don't remember if it was explicitly stated, but I think it was a nice reminder that like you probably might end up with this platonic ideal ace person and like rip it up, rip that person up, rip that platonic ideal person up.
Yeah, I want to also piggyback off something that Kemi was saying as well. I think that I was thinking about this as I was making up the questions for the sci-fi fantasy panel for this week's, like, I don't know what to call it, but this week's like panel celebration. And what I loved as well was like how queer normative it was, how the how the norm was queer, or how it was just like existed, right? Because we had kind of similar questions for our panel and their panel, and the one that I kept being was like, well, they just are. It's not necessarily like someone is going around being like, and this is how I am, like I am ace, or like I am a lesbian. You know what I mean? It was just like, it was queer friendly, and like how that for them was a conscious choice to make, but also, yeah, like how these intersections I think are happening really cool in like that not genre space, because like contemporary is a genre too, but you know what I mean, like second world space, or other world space, to have these like just on the page there. And I did want to say that if I answered the question, what I would really want is more rep in the adult space. I feel like in the YA space, we've been so graced by like you know, all of your books, and then everyone's books basically this panel, or like this celebration week, basically. But I feel like I can only think of like a vast minority percentage-wise of books I can think of that are like adult, you know what I mean, like adult fantasy or adult, you know, just like adult. But yeah, that's what I was thinking about when I was writing this question.
I have a librarian friend who writes and reads a lot of adult romance and will give me like essentially like this kind of reads ace or it's coded or it's a really slow burn like recommendations because I was like I have trouble, and she was telling me like so she's kind of like weeding them out for me and finding them, but like they're not oftentimes explicit.
Yeah, in the chat we were talking about the only one that we can think of was The Romantic Agenda by Claire Kahn. But I mean, Claire Kahn is such a fabulous, like, just writer of queer characters in general, right? Like, I think every book I can think of from Claire is queer in some sort, if not multiple sorts. But yeah, The Romantic Agenda being like an ace adult romance with ace characters, which, like, obviously I love. I just want more. I just want more of them. Okay. We are gonna go. I have a few, like one or two more questions that I want to ask. They are the first one I want to ask about friendship. So friendship is core to kind of all of your stories, really. And so I want to talk specifically about side characters who, you know, they're kind of underrated, right? Like I want to talk about side characters and their reactions to your main character's identity. So, you know, whether or not like it's explicit conversation or just like how that interacts. I know that I'm gonna start with Amanda because I feel like all of the characters are ace. So I was writing this question and be like, I wonder what Amanda will say.
Yeah, I cheated there. But they do still kind of, because yeah, I did want like to represent a spectrum within it. So they do have like different Remy is non-binary, or Gabe is, you know, arrow ace. And so I got to have a little got to play with that a little bit, where like, you know, Gabe is arrow ace, but he's trying to teach Jack how to be a romantic ace, like, hey man, you gotta get your crap together. And kind of like Jack is kind of learning, you know, how to navigate you know, having romantic feelings while still being asexual and that sort of thing. So I had fun with that, and I love my side characters. They're fun, and you don't have to like do as much work on them as you do your main character, and they can just do their own thing.
Akemi.
Yeah, so in Summerbird Blue, Rumi, I think the main side characters, I guess, is Mr. Watanabe, who is probably one of my favorite characters that I've ever written. And he's just this grouchy 80-year-old next door neighbor who really does not give a crap about anything that she's going through other than just being there to let her sound off and sit next to him. And I think that kind of support for Rumi specifically was needed in that book. Kai is the boy next door who she does talk to about like how she's feeling and stuff like that. And I think just in general though, it's just to have like people nearby who just accept her and are not bothered. Like there's no negative kind of reaction to like anything that she says, anything that she's questioning, anything that she's trying to figure out. And I think I do that with like all the books that I've written where there's been a queer character that's, you know, either come out or said something or questioned something. I kind of fill them with like love and support. And part of that, I don't know if people would call it wish fulfillment, but I think for me, even with just the ace part of my identity, just that I think fear of having people react badly or question stuff or just be like, you know, mocking it, whatever it is. And you always get that kind of like bracing of like, you know, like I feel so private about things because I think I just don't want that reaction of then having to explain what it is and have people kind of look like they don't believe you. And I just cannot put that in my books. And it's totally fine for other people who, you know, explore that. That's fine for me. I want it to be a happy place for readers to know that they can say that. And then they're just surrounded by characters who are like, yeah, it's fine. It's not a big deal. So yeah, I think that's where I come from. So.
Anna?
Yeah, I related to that very hard. I also like to give my characters like love and support and warm hugs and everything. Possibly wish fulfillment. I mean, I love like that this is a friendship book more than anything else. I knew from the very beginning it was going to be about a friendship breakup, and also not necessarily have that go in the way that you typically see that. Like, I don't know if that's a spoiler, but like, I have a character who from the very, like, when I first conceived of the story, I was like, I know at the end she's going to have this conversation of like, we still have to be in each other's orbit. So can we like take it down several notches? And I also knew that like not everyone was going to love that, but like I really wanted to write it. And so then obviously, like if I was having her deal with this very toxic friendship and everything going like spiraling downward and going into this extremely toxic place, I also wanted to balance that with like the finding the friend group that is supportive and is amazing. And so I got to write this really, really great lowbrow section. I love them all extremely much. Lots of great side characters. And I think that like when you were talking about like how did the characters respond to the identities, for Yasmin, for my main character, I feel like because she's in that sort of questioning space, a lot of times people just don't, the other friends in the section aren't responding to that specifically, but I think in general they are not shaming her for anything that she's doing, whereas the toxic friend from before was kind of always making her feel like she was weird or like she was doing something wrong, even if she didn't have the words to explain what was wrong. It was like, well, why haven't you done this yet? Or I don't want to be stuck with you for a million years. Like, when are you going to get a boyfriend? Like, why do I have to keep dealing with you? And so like, it's just sort of the absence of that, the absence of being made to feel like there's something you're doing wrong or weird. And then obviously with Bloom, when he says, oh, obviously I don't want to participate in this conversation about Shakira because ... And everyone's like, because what? Because I'm Ace. They're just kind of like continue the conversation. They're still talking about Shakira. It's fine. And I wanted that to just be like the vibes the whole time throughout. And then a couple times he has to remind them like, hey, it's not just friends. It's friends are the most amazing thing in the world. And I think I was glad I got to write that line because it was kind of a theme statement of this book.
Yeah. I think that lowbrow section is just like full of cinnamon rolls. Prickly cinnamon rolls, maybe some of them, but like cinnamon rolls nonetheless. The last question that I have, I want to talk a little bit about titles, which is totally, like not related to what we're talking about mainly. But I just want to ask about titles because I felt like the title range here, of all of the 3 books, like range from being so like, I think I described it as from kind to punny to descriptive, or kind of punny to descriptive. So I want to know about the last one I want to wrap up with tonight is to talk a little bit about the journey with the title. Was it always this title? What happened? What was going on? Kemi, do you want to start?
Yeah, so Summerbird Blue, it is actually the first 3 lines of the book. And basically what it is Rumi and her sister, they dream of being songwriters, and the way they come up with, I guess, their creativity or whatever is to sit there, name 3 random words as fast as they can, and then they write a song with those words in it or inspired by those words. And so I knew that I wanted that to be something that they did together. And so I literally sat and I was like, what's the first 3 words I can think of? And it was Summerbird Blue, and that was the title. So that's literally how it came to be. Yeah, and so that's probably the one that I knew the earliest on in writing. Out of all the books that I've written, it usually doesn't come that quick. I think that I'm more of a get 3/4 of the way through the book before I kind of feel like which title is kind of sinking. I usually have like the first page of the manuscript has like 5, 6 options, and I just keep adding to it, and I just kind of test them out and see what feels right. But Summerbird Blue came very quickly, so for that reason.
But it clearly hasn't started a trend where you name your book always after like the first 3 words.
No, but it did almost, because I had Starfish was my first one, and I was like, am I doing like an animal theme? Like, should I keep this up? And Harley in the Sky was my third book, and there was a thing in there where she really likes red pandas, and I almost for a little bit, I was like, should I put red panda in the title? But I was like, no, I can't. I can't.
Harley's love of red pandas. Amanda?
So obviously, I'm a pun representation here. Yeah, I actually started with the title before anything else because I was like, yeah, that's a good pun. Originally, I was thinking about magic with like with the card thing, and then he's transitioned into poker. But I did have to add a heist because it turns out there are lots of things with this title, including a steamy Texas romance, which is pretty different. So my editor had us add a heist. That's a little flavor. What was I gonna say? I was gonna say something. Oh yeah, yeah. So I started with this title. I got this title through my agent, through submission, through my editor. So it really kind of set me up to. I don't know. I was sad when I had to change the title of my second book. I was like, I was so spoiled for the first one, but at least I got one. I got one in.
It'll be like a note to self. Check out the hashtags of your book, like of Amanda's book, before you post on TikTok.
Oh, really?
Like Aces Wild versus Aces Wild a heist. Gotta make sure you get the right demographic.
Yeah, you don't want the romance fans.
Anna?
I have a very opposite story. Publishing being what publishing is. I've never had a title fully survive. Is that true? Maybe some short stories. Maybe I don't even think for short stories. Frankenstein. When I condensed Frankenstein for young readers, they did not change the title on me. That's all I got. So originally, a million years ago, I conceived of these books as like sort of companion novels. They're not sequels. Just read this one if you don't like the Turf Wizard, please just read this one. I conceived of them as companion novels, and I wanted them to have some kind of similar tie. So I was like, brooms up, horns down. It's going to be adorable. Right? So cute. I love it. I feel good about this. Or horns up or whatever. And then like this one changed. And I think that it was a good choice, and I do like the new title, but it made it to where I was like, I still want them to have retrospect. I probably didn't need to because like the covers were similar and it ended up getting marketed as a sequel anyway, which was like bad for me. So please just read this one. You don't need to read the other one. So that was like, I maybe went in the wrong direction, but I still wanted them to have a little bit of a tie-in. So I used a bunch of different things that like kind of had that same like inspiring feeling and like used the word this. So it was just kind of a title that like, it was the best option of all the options that we were all brainstorming. But I'm not like in love with it. Sorry, book. I love you very much. Your title's a little weird. It's also very hard to search on social media. So, it is what it is. But I don't know that it was like the super most intentional and intelligent title choice, but I'm really bad at titles because I've never gotten a title through through the publishing process fully. Love Sugar Magic had, but that wasn't even me. That was Cake Literary. Kept that, but we like used that as a series title and then had to title each book separately. So that was different. Yeah, I'm not great at titles. They're hard for me. I call my stories by like main character first name for like every draft up until I'm sending it to the publisher. And then I'm like, please name it something.
I think that your next book should also have a verb in the title. You gotta stay consistent, right? Like sound, fly, like all of these are very active
I had
words.
I had a plan to write a D&D book next, and use the same kind of format, and tragically I have been politely asked to write a different genre, so we'll see if that ever happens.
But you could do This Is How It Rolls.
That would be so cute. That's adorable. I like that. So maybe someday. Maybe I'll just write it on my own if publishing doesn't want it.
Yeah, see, I have the opposite problem where I start every draft with a title and I'm like, this is genius. I'm a genius. And then I get attached to it and it turns out I'm not a genius and sometimes I have to let it go.
Yeah, I feel like we're gonna soon enter into the phase of publishing where it's like, is there a hashtag that we can use for this? And if not, then it's gotta go. Like, I feel like we're almost already there.
Nobody told me that, but yeah, I wish I had known.
Right? Like, but yes, thank you so much to everyone who joined. Apologies for the delay. It was entirely my fault. But anyway, thank you to everyone who joined in the chat. And we had a very robust chat, or like active chat. That's what I want to say. Active, not robust. I want to say active. And thank you all to the authors for joining me. I had such a fun time. And also the bookshop links are down in the description box below. So you definitely should pick them up, request them, read them, do all the interactions with them. And yeah, I hope everyone has a really great rest of your day. And definitely, if you want to watch all of the like saga, the Asexual Awareness Week panel saga, they're all on this channel, and I probably will make a playlist for them, so it's easy to like back to back 3 hours of fun. Anyway, thank you all, and I hope everyone has a really great day.